how dangerous it is to perform to others' expectations or cater to others' expectations versus to find our own intrinsically motivated way of showing up in the world. So for athletes, again, you need that motivation from all sides for sure. But somebody who is internally motivated by a way that feels really organic to them will hand over fist always perform somebody who is only, meeting the performance expectations that's coming from the outside.
Welcome to the Elev8 Podcast. I'm your host and coach, Tyler Johnson. Thank you for tuning in. And whether you've tuned in to elevate your mindset, your game, or just your day, you're in the right place. My guest this episode was a #1 top producer and leader at a $2 billion staffing firm for over 14 years. She's been invited to speak to global organizations including Google, Workday, Johnson & Johnson, and JP Morgan Chase. You may have also seen her in Forbes, Real Simple, or Fast Company. She is a 2-time TEDx speaker and is publishing her first book, Good Awkward, coming out this September. Welcome to the Elev8 Podcast, Henna Pryor. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thanks. How are you? Good to meet you.
I am well. I'm excited to have you on. I know from doing a little bit of research, we have two cool things in common: Ted Lasso fans and live music fans. So I wanted to ask, what's the last live music you saw?
The last one, I guess, what was the last one? We took the kids to see Dua Lipa earlier in the year. So I think that was the last one. Yeah.
Fun. Nice. Rock on.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. And do you have a favorite Ted Lasso quote?
Oh God. How do we pick? It's like picking my favorite child. It's the one, I think my favorite one is something about like riding a horse should be uncomfortable. And if you're not uncomfortable, you're not doing it right. Right. As a metaphor for life, like life should be like riding a horse. If you're not uncomfortable, you're not doing it right. Something like that. I like that one.
That is a good one. So I wanted just to start with a few of those. Love those two things. So I wanted to jump into some personal stuff before we got into your amazing professional stuff as well. To give our audience a bit of background, you spend a lot of time in the recruiting world, in the finance world. Can you talk a little bit about that and what kind of led you to what you do now with the Pryority Group?
Yeah, sure. So started my career in public accounting, which people, when they meet me, they're like, really? Yeah, really. So I was a finance major at Delaware. I went to Ernst & Young, which is a large Big Four public accounting firm. They paid for my master's degree. Why I became an accountant was because my parents wanted me to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, firstborn child of immigrants. I was like, no, none of those. How about finance? So that was my concession. I loved being a finance major, but pretty quickly I worked 3 years at Ernst & Young and realized public accounting was not for me. I had just too much personality, I think, to be an auditor, which surprises no one. So when I was looking to switch careers, I had met with a former manager of mine from Ernst & Young, actually went and became a recruiter at Kforce, which is a large publicly traded staffing firm. And she said, well, why don't you do this? This is a job where you can use all your finance and accounting acumen, your knowledge, but it's a people job. It's sales. You get to talk to people all day. And of course, firstborn daughter of immigrants was like, I can't do that. I have a CPA and all these things. I can't be commissions. She said, why not? Try it. So 14 years later, I tried it. And it was the best experience of my life, of my career. And I'm really grateful and humbled to say that if you're good at sales, success is easy to come by, if you have a knack for it. And so in my 20s, I was like, what has been the rest of my life, right? This is fantastic. But then 14 years in, I would say actually about 12 years in, I was still doing very well financially. I was still very successful there. I had a great gig as far as, my kids were born in that career, babies and toddlers. They were very flexible with me. On paper, I had the perfect gig, but there was a voice in me that couldn't stop niggling, saying, hey, you're capable of more than this. You're capable of more than this. I know it's comfortable. I know it's what you know. I know it's been good to you, but you are capable of more. So after trying to beat that voice down for 2 years, I finally listened to it and pivoted to entrepreneurship. I went and got my executive coach certification. So I started doing more one-on-one, which morphed to facilitation, which morphed to keynote speaking. And now I kind of do all of those things, but that leads me to where I am now with the business.
Love it. Just wanted to get a little bit more depth. And I know I was rewatching one of your TED Talks yesterday. Irony, I literally that yesterday morning had given my child a Capri Sun. So I was, I'm like, oh, I forgot she started this way. But why awkwardness is your secret weapon for risk taking. Absolutely love it. And I like the way you present really the gap that we can kind of create. But can you talk a little bit about the approval mindset and so how easily sometimes we can start to be led into that versus our growth or improvement mindset?
Yes, I love it. So thank you for watching it. And I'm knee deep in this work right now because the TEDx is now, expanded to a book that's going to be out in September. But, I refer to these two mindsets. Awkwardness really exists at this gap space. So I'll quickly kind of define awkwardness to give us some shared language through the lens of today. And then we'll talk about the approval thing. But we feel awkward when the person we believe ourselves to be, right, our true selves, comes in odds with the version of ourselves that's on display at a given moment. So, let's just use a really tactical example. I'm walking through the mall and I think I'm somebody who's generally graceful and I whack myself on a, rack and I hurt myself and I scream, ow. And people are all staring and I suddenly feel awkward and embarrassed and flushed because in that moment, the person I believe myself to be, this somewhat put together human being, is at odds with the person who they all see on display, this, idiot that doesn't know how to walk, right? Awkward. That can happen in unplanned moments, just life moments. We can also feel awkward in planned moments where at work, we raise our hand, we have a great idea, and all of a sudden nobody's as excited about our great idea as we are. And there's silence and we're like, okay, right? This is awkward. Nobody's into this. But it's that same experience where the person we believe ourselves to be is suddenly at odds with all of a sudden who we think they see. And so when we think about the approval mindset, it's really that part two of the equation. It's our hyper focus on the version of us that we think they see. We start to behave in ways because we're social creatures, we're tribal, community creatures. We behave in ways that make that feel like less of a threat. How do we, show up in the world so that we are able to stay safe in our social circles? How do we stay in a position where if we step out of line, that we will still be loved, included, worthy, considered, intelligent? And especially at work, what I see a lot is that approval mindset, it controls people. It prevents them from raising their hand. It prevents them from taking micro risk and macro risk. And so the big danger is it keeps us stuck. It keeps us from doing the things that we need to do to advance our careers and our lives.
I think a lot of listeners on this podcast, student athletes, coaches, myself included in my experience, sought out a lot of external expectations and approval through sport. There's some healthiness to being approved by your tribe and your people, right? And there's some in relationships and where that goes. When does it get to the point where it hinders our development and our improvement? When does it kind of, like, as you said, kind of steer us wrong?
Yeah. And so you're right. I want to just honor what you just said, which is being social creatures means to a degree, we need to learn how to be people who live in a society, right? So that feeling of awkwardness is what tries to protect us from being ostracized, right? We do need to be cooperative. We want to fit in. We don't want to create waves. Our caveman brains were designed that way because if we stood out, we didn't stay in the tribe. We got killed. We got ostracized, right? So same brains that we have today. So these are conditionings that we have from caveman era on. That's fine when we're trying to live harmoniously with our peers. Where it becomes problematic is when, I kind of have this visual of a scale, right? When there's something that we as humans, whether we're athletes, whether we're professionals, whether we're performers, when we really want to see our lives go in a certain way, when we really want that scale to tilt towards improve, And that improvement might require a little bit of zigging where others are zagging. If we get super hyper focused on the approval, if we let that outweigh, then we'll never take the necessary chances to try to do it a little differently, to take the bigger risk, to take the bigger ask, to, sign up for the competition that feels just out of reach. We won't, because the approval mindset will outweigh it every time. So it's really a moment of inflection, right? Which one wins right now? We have to have that conversation with ourselves regularly.
I think the way you presented the risk in your example of, correcting someone with, calling you Helen, versus the other risk. I think sometimes we forget that there is risk either way. And sometimes we get steered by this approval mindset by taking the one that makes us maybe not feel awkward and stay in our little safe space. The one thing you talked about too, that I thought was great for athletes and just growth and coaches, is acknowledging we're going to have these ick moments. Can you tell us a little bit about ick moments and how we accept them to help ourselves?
Yeah. So ick moments are what I call those moments when we're standing at the edge of the cringe chasm. So just to kind of back into it a little, when we're standing here on the approval side of the coin, it's nice and safe and warm over here. Everybody likes us over here, right? But sometimes, again, when we've made that little mental weight decision about improvements on the other side over there, and I know I need to get there, we've got to put a little jump. We've got a little chasm, a little gap to cross. So ick moments are when you're standing on the edge of that approval side and you're thinking, oh God, this doesn't feel good. I have a pit in my stomach. I'm nervous. I'm sweating. I feel very uncomfortable. People are watching me do this right now. It might be awkward. It might be embarrassing. I might fall down the thing. But ick moments are when you remind yourself. So ick is actually ICC, and it stands for improvement comes after cringe. So improvement comes after cringe. It's just a little priming reminder that when you're standing at the edge and you make that little jump, when you find the activation energy, the muscle to say, I'm just going to try this thing. It doesn't have to feel amazing, but I'm going to try it anyway, to constantly remind yourself, this is an ick moment, and improvement will come after the cringe. When I get to the other side of that feeling, there's improvement. So just that framing, I think, sometimes help people find the energy needed to jump that chasm and get to the other side.
Definitely. You talked about the book coming out in September. What are you most excited about? I know you put a lot of work, heart, and soul into it. What are you most excited as it meets other people in the world?
Yeah, I think what I'm most excited about is, I say this very humbly, I did not want to write a book that was already written, right? Like there's so many books about get comfortable being uncomfortable, or play at your, growth edge, get out of your comfort zone. We know that narrative, right? We know that one. And so one of my personal commitments to myself was I didn't want to write something unless it really illuminated a fresh take or fresh perspective on an emotion and the specific way that this emotion impacts our performance. And so I'm really proud of the fact that it's a really fresh take on things. And when I teach it to people and they read stuff, they're like, I didn't honestly know any of this about the feeling of awkwardness. I didn't realize this is where it came from. I didn't realize this is why it's sticky and why it doesn't go away easily and why I dwell on it and ruminate on it. But there's been some, our shared friend, Colin Henderson, he likes to make fun of me because I love sparkly new research. Like I get my jollies over sparkly new research. And there's some cool sparkly new research about how dangerous it is to perform to others' expectations or cater to others' expectations versus to find our own intrinsically motivated way of showing up in the world. So for athletes, again, you need that motivation from all sides for sure. But somebody who is internally motivated by a way that feels really organic to them will hand over fist always perform somebody who is only, meeting the performance expectations that's coming from the outside. Always. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of data around that. And now they're finding the same thing to be true in the workplace too, that performing actually hurts our performance when you actually are catering to others versus tapping into your own authentic intrinsic motivation. And so there's just some new stuff around that I'm excited for people to learn.
That's what I love, just the topic of being authentic. And I think because we do chase approval mindsets and let people put us in boxes sometimes and things like that. And I think that's leadership. Great leadership, I think, requires that a level of authenticity. And where do you see, when I hear you talk and I hear your TEDx and listen to things, a bit of awkwardness kind of makes the most authentic people I know have like a quirk, maybe a quirkiness, I would call it. But still, they're very okay with themselves, whether they hit the clothing rack or trip on the curb, so to speak. But how can awkwardness help us be more authentic with those, or maybe we're trying to lead?
Yeah, I love that question. So, one of the assertions, or let's even call it like the backbone of the book, is that it is a fool's errand to try to eliminate awkwardness in our lives. It's not going to happen. And a lot of us continue to try. Like we try to make it so our lives eliminate awkwardness, where really the key to true confidence, to true courage, is embracing it instead, getting comfortable with it, leaning into it. And so what I want people to walk away with is that, whatever that smooth, effortless, unblemished confidence that seems to emanate off of certain, professional athletes or movie stars or leaders in the business that we admire, I'll never have it. Like it's not even a goal worth trying to reach for. That smooth, untouchable, like not a chance. And I feel like most people I talk to feel the same way. They're like, that just feels, that's never happening for me. That's just not who I am. And so what I want people to know is available to them is what I call in the book, awkward confidence, a grounded confidence. It's not trying to be unblemished. It's leaning into the blemishes and using them purposefully, intentionally, as part of your persona, as part of your competitive edge, and learning to befriend them and embrace them. Most people look at me and it still makes me laugh, as very confident. And it's not that I've worked out any of those bumpy, jaggy edges. My God, no. In fact, I think they're even more on display than ever in my life. But I have befriended them, and that translates to people as an accessible, grounded confidence. And so that's what I would love more people to aim for, rather than this sort of flawless standard that no one can actually meet.
Yeah. And I think where do you see approval in alignment with the chase of perfection?
Yeah, I think that's the heart of it. I think most people, as again, social creatures, worry that if they don't do it right, that they will lose approval, they will lose their standing. I try to make a distinction very early in the book that awkwardness is not the same as ineptitude, right? I'd be, I mentioned there that I would be nervous if I hired an inept anesthesiologist, but I would be perfectly fine hiring an awkward one, right? So we're not talking about ineptitude. We're not talking about a lack of skill or a lack of competence. We're talking more about just an ability to understand that life is inherently jagged. We are inherently bumpy and blemished, and that's part of the journey. And understanding that this fear of losing approval is often inflated, right? So not to nerd out too much, but Tom Gilovich from Cornell, he calls it the spotlight effect, where we think people are lasered in on these blemishes, on these imperfections, and that we're going to lose approval because they're looking at them so closely, when the reality is they're not. They're more worried about whether we think they look awkward or whether we approve of them. So it's just really understanding how those things play out and how they stop us in the future.
I love it. One of the things that also caught my mind, a lot of my experience working with teams and student athletes and coaches, is getting them to align their core values and what they're doing to their goals and their actions. And you had a quote that you mentioned, and it says, alignment makes it possible. And I'm a big believer. And I came from the football world, where football coaches tell you alignment, assignment, nowhere to be and nowhere to be, know what to do. That's the first that, and so it's like, because if you're not aligned and know what to do, how are you going to achieve what we're trying to do? Why is alignment with understanding who we really are and what we're trying to do in the world or provide in the world so important?
Yeah, I love your of that, and I love the alignment assignment thing. I'm like, how can I use that? How can I use that in the future? Aligning with your values is how you're going to know which cringe chasms are worth crossing. Right? Not every chasm is worth crossing. And so if you are going to find the muscle to jump this particular cringy moment, you need to know which direction you're going to. So I don't recommend people just blindly throwing themselves into situations where they're, going to cringe regularly for no real reason, right? Part of using this idea of awkwardness as a catalyst for risk taking is knowing where you're headed. And so to me, values are directionality, right? What is important to you, what drives you, what motivates you. And when you're very clear on those, and plenty of people aren't, I'm sure Tyler, like plenty of people aren't, but when you're clear on what those are, you will find that the muscle behind that cringe chasm jump will come more readily. It will feel more easy to make it over the hump in those moments because you can see clearly why you're doing it. It's very visible to you on the other side. When we're just blindly doing it in the absence of values, we kind of feel all the discomfort of awkwardness without the upside, without the why, without the purpose. So I think it does need to be defined by our purpose and values in order to be worth it, for us to feel like it's worth enduring that feeling.
The coach mind in me heard you say muscle. So it makes me think with repetitions, we can become better at this.
Yes, I love that you said that, because that is the action there. I always say, just like building physical muscle, building awkward tolerance is a mental muscle. It is a mental muscle, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was going to ask, we're going to play a game with, I know several of my past guests, so we're going to play a game, one word, but one of the things that one of those people, we're going to talk about Travis Thomas. That I believe
Okay.
He talks about yes and in acceptance. And I think whether it's a mistake in the professional world or a mistake in sports, how do you see acceptance playing in a role in being able to take the jump over the...
Yeah, we're brain matching here, because I have an entire chapter in my book about one of the fastest way to condition for awkward is having an improv mentality, where I interviewed Travis as part of it. So yeah, we're right on the same page there, 100%. I think one of the fastest ways you can get comfortable with awkwardness is understanding that you cannot avoid it. And that is an acceptance philosophy. So if you think about improv, nothing is necessarily laid out for you, right? Every next sentence has the potential to invite awkwardness. So when we talk about conditioning your muscle to prepare your mental muscle, improv is one of the fastest ways to do that, because you think something is coming next, and the goal of your partner is to literally catch you off guard, right? To literally make it so that you're unprepared for what comes next. So yeah, I think what that exercise, the practice of improv forces of you, is accepting what is in the moment, accepting the discomfort of the unknown in the moment, expecting the inevitable awkwardness that accompanies it, but then starting to normalize that feeling, starting to make it feel less big and take the power out of it. But I agree 100%. I think if you can't accept the reality of what is, if you can't embrace the inevitability of what is, it's going to stop you every time. There's no getting through it.
Yeah. I'm excited for that chapter, especially with a little Travis name drop in there.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to ask you before we have a little fun as well to wrap up, but and you talked early on about your career and where you've gone and what you do now. What brings you the most joy in the work you get to do now? And
oh boy, that's a big question. What brings me the most joy? I'm an extrovert through and through. So I have a job that I get to meet new people like you. I meet people and talk to people constantly. So for someone who receives energy from interacting with others, it's just a blessing to get to be a speaker, coach, and facilitator, and get to meet new people, talk to new people. I think more than anything, my biggest joy moments are when someone tells me that something I've taught them or something I've said has had a serious transformational effect on their life. And it's funny that, and I'm sure this is 100% the case with coaches too. Sometimes it's that one thing, just that one thing, that one insight, that one story, that one something that they saw themselves in, that's the catalyst that changes everything. And so when those moments happen, it's, I'm smiling for days. I really enjoy that feeling. I'm grateful anytime I get to see it and experience it.
You must do it pretty well, because I know they have, what is it? They call you the something of doing the impossible.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
you got a nickname,
Secret weapon for
secret
impossible
weapon.
change.
Yeah, you are the secret weapon for impossible change. I'm
Yeah,
sure our listeners, if they've been listening, they can start to identify some of those things themselves.
I love it.
Um, but what is it? The people that you think sometimes are missing as a secret weapon, relationships. What is some of the secret
Yeah,
weapon sauce that you think
sure.
or you observe maybe teams and
Yeah.
organizations missing?
It can be a lot of things, but I would say that to me, at least the people that I attract to work with or the people that I like to work with, the people that I like to work with already have a bias for action. So for them, it's not that they struggle to take action. For them, there always seems to be some sort of mental block that
Mm.
they have not yet identified. So these are people who will, take action in every other part of their life, but in this one area, they seem to find themselves repeating the same mistake or getting stuck or getting trapped. And so I think, when people use that secret weapon term with me, I feel like one of the things that I've found a little gift in doing is unkinking the hose, right? Where is
Yeah.
this one mental block that if we were to remove that and really get clear on it and get it out of the way, it's like all of a sudden the proverbial, hose flows, it's going and everything else follows suit. So that to me is some of the most fun work because little change, huge result. But yeah, in general, I think like I like to connect the dots, right? So, people are very close to their own lives. Athletes, same thing. They're very close to their own lives. And that's why you need coaches. That's why you need people who can zoom out and say, I know this is what you think the issue is, but here's what I'm really seeing is the issue. And so that ability to be that third party, I'm certainly not alone. There's a million talented coaches and speakers that can do this, but I think that's just such valuable supportive work for the people who need it the most.
Yeah. There's a good balance. I think college teammate of mine, his brother played in the major leagues one time, and I was talking to him. I asked him about coachability. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you've had all these different pitching coaches in the major leagues and, a different guy all the time. And I was like, well, how do you stay receptive to what they're trying to tell you? And I think it was just something I took into my own life was, he just brought in, when I'm on the mound, I can feel what I do, but I can't see
Mm,
what I'm doing.
yeah.
He goes, he can see what I'm doing and I can feel, and somehow we have to come together to create a great picture. And
Yeah. I
so
love that.
it was just, that was a great way to just, I thought for him to see new coaching all the time was that they always see what I can't.
Yeah.
I can feel the pitch, but I can't see myself pitch. It's impossible
Yeah.
until I use technology. So,
Yeah,
um,
I love that. I love that framing. I think that's really powerful.
and I think that coaching relationship, that see and feel, and sometimes just being, again, you have to be able to accept what they're seeing
Hmm. Yeah.
to allow it to help us. But as we wrap up, I wanted to play a fun game. We get to play with some of our guests that know some other
Okay.
guests. So
Okay.
I'm going to name some people that I'm pretty sure and
Okay.
you can tell us what you think of them in, hopefully one kind word. Uh,
One kind word. Okay.
it does, but we brought him up earlier, but Travis Thomas,
Delightful.
delightful, love it, love it. Colin Henderson,
I knew you were going to say that. I'm like, I
of
can't do that
course,
in one word. Best friend. I know it's
best
two
friend.
words, but
Okay, that's fine. I think he's actually probably been involved in this game most in the podcast. No, most people know
yeah.
it, so it's good.
Yeah.
And then another one who I also very much endeared to is Joshua Lifrak.
Ah, joyful.
Joyful. Most definitely. Well, sorry to put you on the spot,
I
calling out
love
some of
it.
your friends, but
I love
this is
it.
something we like to try. And so I'll link up those people in podcast if you
Yeah.
want to hear some of the other mutual people Henna and I
Yeah.
have been able to come across. So you
Fun.
talked about one other thing as we wrap up. I wanted to ask one more
Hmm.
question. You talked about kind of the alignment and you brought up energy. And I think I'm big on energy. Like, how do you, create your energy, sustain it, especially I think is, being someone that's, like you said, an extrovert, you're out serving, you're out
Hmm.
speaking. It takes a lot of energy.
Hmm.
How do you create and sustain the energy to do what you do to serve as you serve?
That's such a great question. I'll say the one most powerful learning for me in this regard is I'm high energy. I seem to have one of these like bottomless wells of energy. But because of that, my danger isn't how do I muster the energy? My danger is I will run so hard that I won't know when I'm starting to hit that breaking point until it's too late. So the way I've had to develop some tools around managing and sustaining my energy is, I've needed to really learn how to be clear on when my metaphorical check engine light has started to go off. So identifying what are those triggers, what are those physical signs, what are those mental and emotional, flags that I've started to go a little too hard, because otherwise you can be super high energy and then crash and burn. And so for me, managing my energy is less about mustering the initial energy, but more about managing it as I start to get into heavy periods of endurance and knowing when to catch it before I go a little too far.
Love it. Love it. Well, as we wrap up, last question, student athletes, coaches, definitely, we get caught being awkward out in those performances. Sometimes it's just warming you up, but what would be your quick hitting ending advice to maybe any student athlete out there that may feel shameful about their awkwardness?
Oh gosh, I know athletes uniquely have, a bigger spotlight on them. People are watching. I don't want to pretend that they're not, but here's the truth. The universal emotion of awkwardness is for everyone. All of the athletes you admire, everyone that you think is flawless, they feel it just as acutely as you do. They've just learned to embrace it and realize it's part of the game that you're playing. So don't think that you're alone. The people you admire most, they experience it right along with you. So don't try to run away from it. Get good at it.